I would say we get started. Hi and welcome everyone to this month's technical steering committee of the EVerest project. We have, as always, our highlights of the month. One of it was the CharIN Testival in North America, where we found out that 6 out of the 22 chargers that were there for testing were actually running EVerest, which is quite a nice average and a good number. We had the first successful SAE J2847 V2H session. I think this has been implemented a couple of months ago, but we never had the opportunity to test this with the real car. And we also had several successful ISO 158-20 DC and DC BPT sessions. So quite a successful event there. OCPP 2.1, we are about to start with this. We made some refactorings and preparations for it. I think there's a dedicated section for it later on, so maybe I can go more into detail there. For ISO 15118, we have a new version of the lib ISO released, and support was added for the dynamic mode. Yeah, and there had been conversation with some contributors from the Delaware University that shared information about CP-LIN and MCS. So there seemed to be quite some interesting news from the US about that. All right, as always, for a moment, please have a look at the antitrust policy notice here. And we will head over to the What's New section. Here again is a list of known EVerest-based chargers. We have the Mahle Charge Big, the Quello CP2122, Podpoint Solo 3S, and charging stations from Intelligent, Voltpost, Quello's retrofit kits, and Joule. I have heard that Marco is currently at an event and met a guy he did not know before, but he was from a company that actually have an EVerest-based charger as well. So we're trying to get to know about these projects to be able to extend this list. Probably on the next month, this one's also added here. If you know chargers that use EVerest, of course, please let us know so that we can extend it here. Right, here is again the overview about the EVerest supported EVSE controllers and DevKits that we are aware of. Access Instruments, NXP Analog Devices, Renesas, as well as ChargeByte, Phytech, Advantech, EFI, Seed Studio, and the products that Pionix offers. Then one other thing worth to mention is the FOSDEM 2025. Since Kai is now in the call, but I'm not sure how well his connection is, he might want to say a few things about that. But maybe I can also take over that part since it seems like his connection is not that good. So there will be an energy dev room again. I think it has been there at the FOSDEM last year as well, and the year before, apparently. So for the third time, there will be the energy dev room at the FOSDEM, accelerating the transition through open source. And we are looking for presentations related to the energy system and energy usage. And there's a link where you can add your application to give a presentation at the FOSDEM for the energy dev room. Past event, the Electronica in Munich was a little bit earlier in November, where my colleague Ron had a talk about how to build a DC charger with EVerest. And we saw that new controller makers and silicon vendors are evaluating and planning to join EVerest. I have already talked about the CharIN Testival in San Bernardino. where we had some good testing sessions, and also Pionix got a couple of awards. I think they had called it prescribed testing, so with some dedicated test plans that they were executing, and apparently EVerest and Pionix had a good score for those tests. So that's nice side news here. And yeah, as I mentioned already, 6 out of 22 chargers were running EVerest. 5 out of 22 teams used EVerest or the micro-megawatt charger for testing. That was named the Irdeto Emobi Pionix Joet and project. Right. Then there was the EU Commission workshop, Advanced Standardization. It was a workshop on cross-domain standardization and architecture for IoT and edge computing, with the goal to create standards-based interoperable energy system. Yeah, my colleague Tim was there, and there was a presentation about EEBus as the standard for connecting smart devices. We in the EVerest project are currently also working on an integration of an open source EEBus stack into EVerest. Yeah, and we will probably have something that we can present here early next year. Right. The EV Charging Special Interest Group. Apparently, there was the first annual project review from the Special Interest Group, or the one is upcoming for CharIN OS. I guess that's it about the news here. And I think, well, then we can jump over to updates on the individual working groups. And the first one is grid integration and energy management. I think we called it out last time that there had been a refactor of the energy management within EVerest, especially about the integration of the API and the OCPP modules. It became more flexible with the new approach, where you can now configure an energy tree, basically, and you are able to input energy limits also from different sources, like OCPP and the API modules, but you could also think of other sources that should influence the charging, and decoupled this functionality from the EVSE manager, which also means that this is quite a big change to your existing configuration files. We added some documentation about this on everestgithub.io. You will find it, what you need to keep track of and what kind of changes are required here. And that was, yeah, you could say the starting point also for moving on with OCPP 2.1 and ISO 15118-20. As you probably know, 2.1 brings in a lot of requirements for the energy management and for bidirectional charging, as well as the 15118-20. And those two protocols require a good combination, and that combination happens within EVerest, within the EVerest energy management. So we are currently, yeah, trying to prepare for this and plan this, since there will probably be larger changes required. So I personally am scanning through the 2.1 specification, the draft that is currently out, to understand what are the requirements that come from there. And I could already see that there are probably some larger changes required. Yeah, and then if you know any early OCPP 2.1 CSMS implementations, please let us know. It would be very nice to have some partners or systems that we can use for testing our 2.1 implementation, which we will now implement. yeah, and especially having an opportunity to test the whole chain from the card to the CSMS, be able to test this functionality would be very nice. Definitely. Right. Quick update on the cloud communication working group. I already mentioned that we're moving forward with 2.1. We will now create a 2.1 feature branch, while 2.1 is still in draft. We don't want to add the changes at main right now, since they might change until the final version is released, but we already want to get started with it. And there is a branch that already added the OCPP 2.1 messages based on the latest schemas, and we will branch off that branch or use that branch to branch protect it, and then have PRs that undergo the usual review process, so that we can actually get started with implementing use cases and functional blocks for it. Then for 2.0.1, the functional block reservation has finally been added in EVerest core and libOCPP, so this is now available. The libOCPP documentation has been refactored, and now the library is also hosted. I'm not sure, since that we were working on that today, if there is a version that I can show you, but I think it's it's not yet deployed, so I will update the link, because I'm not sure if that's the actual one, but I think that was the one that was discussed. But well, the documentation of libOCPP will now be available there, which is quite nice. Yeah, and then maybe two smaller things. We refactored the message dispatching in libOCPP also in preparation for 2.1. We were doing that already, to separate application logic better, to allow for easier unit testing of the functional blocks. And what is quite nice is that we continue to use OCTT, and we also use the automated test execution API, and it works quite well. So basically you can now have single command running a full functional block or a full certification profile or a single test case by just one command using the API, and you get your result. This is pretty useful. We see when we run those, like when we run a full functional block, we still see test cases failing that do not fail if we run them manually or in sequence. So we are currently investigating that, and there will probably be quite some follow-up tasks, but we're trying to get into a stable state where we can reliably run them automatically, which is pretty nice. Yeah, at least for like the Pionix side, since I think it's not yet possible to actually include this into the CI of the public EVerest project. But I think this is also something that we can discuss at some point. At least we have the tooling for it available. All right, car communication working group, and for this I would head over to Moritz.
Yes, I'll take this. Starting off again with the CharIN Testival in San Bernardino. This has been mentioned twice already, I think. So the usual stuff and plug and charge was working. This is already well tested. First time that the SAE J2847 was tested with an actual EV, and successfully, of course. Now -20 testing is picking up, so both DC and DCBPT are working. And as you'll see below in the mention at the lib ISO 15118, the dynamic mode is also being tested. This was the long-awaited dynamic mode. So far, it was only the scheduled mode, which is similar to the -2. So that's an important feature step for the whole infrastructure for the lib ISO and for the modules. As Pete mentioned, a lot of EVerest-based chargers present, which does mean something, and some awards awarded to Pionix. I mentioned the lib ISO 15118, taking big steps forward. The CBXyGen, the codec for the EXE coding of the ISO messages, Finally, some work being done on the bug fixes, on feature enhancements. The former, the used loop grammar is a code improvement. There's still some more improvements to be done that are in the backlog, and the big integer support for correct support of the X509 serial numbers for the large serial numbers as issued by, for example, object certificates. That is finally in and working correctly. So one more step to fully functional plug and charge. There are still some open issues and feature enhancement, pull requests, and so on. And we are currently working on all of them, at least taking a look at the enhancements and checking whether it's worth the effort and cleaning up the final bugs there. In EVerest Core, there's also some car communication related stuff being done, quite a few open pull requests with some examples here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Moritz. Next is the EVerest Framework and Tools Working Group, where we have linked a couple of improvements and PRs. There has been support added for errors in Rust. Not sure, Holger, if you want to say a few words about this.
I think it's basically that we like the errors were finalized in C++. We were waiting for that, and then we made an implementation, and it's now available in Rust as well.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Then we have added support for wildcard MQTT subscribe, and added exceptions during command calls and handling. Currently, I'm not sure if those are actually merged or drafted. Yeah, the last two are not yet merged, but I think worth mentioning here. And also the config delivery via MQTT from manager to modules is something that will speed up the starting process, as far as I know. And this PR is also still in review, so quite some stuff under development currently in the EVerest framework. We plan to move some tools that are currently in EVerest utils to EVerest Core. This is namely EV CLI or EV DevTools and EVerest testing. Yeah, I think on the testing working group, I can give an update on what has happened there. And then we continue to work on proper termination of EVerest modules, and the EVerest configuration service that will allow you to change module configuration and read module configuration at runtime. This is what we are currently working on here. This is another slide still about EVerest framework and tools working group. So there is the suggestion to merging the two working groups in one. So that's namely framework and tools and CI and testing. Since, yeah, there have not been that many people attending there. So the idea is to merge the two working groups into one. And we could start with that in January 2025. So yeah, I've been to a couple of those meetings as well, and they went quite quick. Yeah, I think it's a little bit, yeah, it really depends on if there are people currently working on some topics and if there's also like collaboration cross companies going on. If this is not the case, and that's currently the case for framework and tools and CI and testing, yeah, and if that's the case, usually these meetings are quite short. So once we started these working groups, we said we want to be flexible with it, so that I'd be in favor of that adoption. I'm not sure if this is something that we officially should decide here in the TSC. Not sure, Moritz, Holger, if you have I want to have a word on this. But that would be Pionic's suggestion at least.
Let's discuss after the recording, I'd say. like that might be a longer topic.
In the discussion round, yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Right. Last working group, I think, CI/CD and testing. So we have been working on reusable workflows for the CI for quite a while, so they have been merged in EVerest core, and there are open PRs for libOCPP and liblog. There is a larger update that's not mentioned on the slide, so we have added a lot of end-to-end tests to EVerest core that were closed source for quite some time. We started to test the OCPP 1.6 implementation there, but also added tests for OCPP 2.0.1 in the meantime. Yeah, they are written in Python using PyTest, and they actually start up a complete EVerest instance as a sub-process and then verify OCPP messages, but they implicitly also test like a lot of things that happen within EVerest, including ISO 15118 charging processes with plug and charge, for example, and yeah, all the charging session logic that's going on in the EVSE manager. And they run as a additional job in the CI on every PR. And currently this job, it's not required to pass, since we want to have like a couple of weeks to test this out and see if this is really something that we want to apply and make a requirement, since we were not really sure how many pull requests are actually involved. Yeah, after this testing phase, which looks quite good, we will probably make it a requirement. Maybe before that, we want to work on speeding this up a little bit, since this action runs for about 20 minutes right now. Since these E2E tests, starting and stopping in EVerest instance for every test case is it can consume quite some time. So there are some follow-up issues that we want to work on afterwards. Right. Right. I missed the general discussions and QA working group. They're now alternating time slots for the general call. 1 week the US friendly and the other weeks APAC friendly hours. And you will find that represented in the calendars of the LF Energy.
Yes, the calendar had to be cleaned up because some dates weren't correctly represented. Robert cleaned that up.
Okay. Yeah, I read this as well. Right. Updates from the vulnerability management team. Yeah, probably Kai could report more about this, but there was one minor information disclosure vulnerability to report. There's a patch upcoming and will also be provided for the stable release of September. But that was the only thing to report here. Yeah, if you want to report something, you can do this via the email list everest-security@lists.lfenergy.org. Right, so we have November, so we have a monthly source code release upcoming. And then for December, there's the last release of the year, and it'll be a stable release again. Those are the release notes for November 2024 release. I think a lot of that has been said in the meeting, but I quickly go through it. So we have added ISO 15118-20 dynamic mode support. We have moved the device model implementation of OCPP 2.0.1, or basically created a composed device model so that it's now easier to add the EVerest configuration service to also request and write variables that are outside of the scope of OCPP. So that was basically a preparation for it. The Slack simulator initialized state with unmatched was worked on. We have fixed that typo and the transition rule comment, the OCPP end-to-end tests I mentioned, and the reservation changes in 201. That was the last functional block that was added there. There was an update on the network connection profile callback in OCPP 201. Yeah, worth mentioning was also the move of the error handling that now allows modules to also report errors earlier and get recognized by OCPP 201, where there was like a little bit of a synchronization issue at startup.
Also, probably worth mentioning that you made a September release update 24.9.1 with some bug fixes for libOCPP in the stable version, a 3-month stable release cycle, right?
Yeah, that is right. I think that was published only yesterday or 2 days ago, the September release. We have a .release 2024.9.1 that contains a couple of fixes for libOCPP. Yeah. Or OCPP in general. Yeah. Right. Right. Again, a call for new Linux Foundation Energy members. If you are running a project in the energy industry, which is open source or which you would like to open source, please get in touch and use the link below to sign up. Quick look at the roadmap for OCPP. For like what we have today, I think don't need to iterate over that. But if you look at Q4, the reservation has been merged recently. So next month you will see it in the today section. And yeah, we are working more towards full and stable 2.0.1 implementation, and will start to work on 2.1 core with the functional block bidirectional power transfer. So the V2X use case is probably what we will start with, and afterwards we will look at event streams, ad hoc payment, and prepaid card, and the rest of the new stuff in 2.1. For ISO 15118, we are looking into a stable release for DC and DC BPT, as well as the -20 pause resume feature. And in the next year, we will work on the beta release for AC and AC BPT, as well as the -20 plug and charge. And also, we will work on the megawatt charging based on the hardware in the loop, following by other features of the -20, like schedule renegotiation and car simulation that is coming up there. Right. Not sure if there's anything more to add, like on the short midterm roadmap here. What's not part like of OCPP and ISO 15118 is other protocols around car communication. I mentioned in the beginning that there's quite some stuff happening in the US. So the standardization landscape is growing here. So we are looking into GBT and CharIN as well. And I think I also mentioned that we are also working or looking into energy management protocols like EEBus and OpenADR, where probably already early next year we will also have some adoption in the EVerest project. Right. Here's a list of upcoming events starting next year. So I will just keep that open for a moment so that everybody can have a quick look. And I can just call out the next TSC, which will be on December 19th, 2024, the last one of the year. Yeah, you can join that or one of the public working group calls happening every week or bi-weekly. Yeah, you can check out the calendar for that. All right, so thanks for joining and for viewing, and we can head over to the discussion section.